For 30 years, I've sat on this bench watching people from all walks of life. I thought I had humanity completely figured out. I thought I knew exactly what a person would do when nobody was watching, especially in their darkest moments. But I was wrong. Completely wrong. One morning, a boy walked into my courtroom. He didn't come in holding a parent's hand. He came in escorted by a police officer wearing a jacket 3 sizes too big and sneakers held together by gray duct tape. He was maybe 10 years old, and what he brought with him, and what happened next, stopped me cold. I sat there, a man who has presided over thousands of cases, feeling a lump form in my throat. I was speechless. What this child did, and more importantly, how the owner of that wallet reacted, is a story I carry with me every single day. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. But before we dive into this whole story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share with you is something that needs to be heard. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single word. Let me start by telling you a little bit about my courtroom, because it matters for this story. I've been a judge in this city for 3 decades. I've seen the absolute best of people and the absolute worst. Every single morning, I walk through those heavy oak doors believing one thing. Character isn't defined by the balance in your bank account. Rich or poor, young or old, it doesn't matter what neighborhood you came from. My grandfather came to this country with nothing but a cardboard suitcase and a strong back. He worked the docks, lifting crates in the freezing rain. He used to tell me, honesty is the only currency that never loses its value. I never forgot that. I watched him struggle to pay the rent, but he never took a dime that wasn't his. Growing up watching him, I learned what real dignity looks like. I learned early in my career to look at the whole person standing in front of me and ask myself, what is this person's life really like? What brought them here today? That morning was a Tuesday in November. It was bitterly cold. The kind of cold that sinks right into your bones and makes the city look gray and unforgiving. The docket was full of routine cases, property disputes, minor infractions, routine stuff mostly. But then the heavy wooden doors opened and this boy walked in. His name was Leo. He had been sleeping in a subway station for 3 weeks. His hands were shaking, mostly from the cold, but also from fear. And in those small, freezing hands, he held a thick designer leather wallet. Inside that wallet was exactly $10,000 in crisp $100 bills. Let me ask you something right now. Be honest with yourself. If you hadn't eaten a warm meal in 3 days, if you were sleeping on concrete and you found $10,000 in cash on a freezing sidewalk, what would you do? Leave me a comment because I actually read them. About an hour into the morning session, my clerk called the matter forward. Now I need you to understand this wasn't a criminal trial for the boy. The police had brought him in because the owner of the wallet had filed a frantic report claiming he had been robbed. When the officers found little Leo near the transit station holding the wallet, they brought him straight to my courtroom to sort out the truth on the record. I looked out at the gallery, and that's when I saw the owner. His name was Richard Sterling. He was a prominent local real estate developer. You know the type. He walked up to the front of my courtroom like he owned the building, wearing a custom-tailored suit that probably costs more than my first car. He had his phone in one hand, aggressively tapping out an email, barely paying attention to the freezing, trembling child standing just a few feet away from him. I looked down at the police report. Officer Miller, a good, honest cop I've known for years, stood next to Leo. He testified that they found Leo sitting under a street lamp in the freezing rain. He hadn't spent a single dollar, not one. He didn't even buy a piece of bread. And I could literally see his shoulders shivering through that oversized jacket. He was just sitting there waiting for a police cruiser to drive by so he could hand it over. I looked down from my bench at Mr. Sterling. I said, Mr. Sterling, this child found your wallet on the street. He waited in the freezing cold to make sure it was safely returned to law enforcement. And you know what this man did? He didn't say thank you. He didn't even look at the boy's face. He stepped forward, snatched the leather wallet off the clerk's table, and immediately started counting the $100 bills one by one, right there in my courtroom. He licked his thumb and flipped through the cash. His eyes narrowed like he fully expected this starving 10-year-old child to be a common thief. I let the silence sit in the room. I've learned over 30 years that silence is one of the most powerful tools a judge has. I let it get very, very quiet. I watched him count every last bill. I kept my face perfectly still. I've had a lot of practice keeping my face neutral when it doesn't want to be. But inside my blood was boiling. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about what dignity actually means in this world. Dignity isn't a silk tie or a thick wallet. Dignity is what was standing in those duct tape shoes. When Sterling finally finished counting, he snapped the wallet shut. "It's all here," he said, sounding almost annoyed, like he was disappointed he couldn't press charges. I took off my glasses. I leaned forward over the bench, looking right into his eyes. I said, "Mr. Sterling, a 10-year-old boy who doesn't have a roof over his head just returned $10,000 in cash to you. Do you have absolutely anything you want to say to him?" And what he said next, it shocked every single person in that room. Richard Sterling looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time, but there was no gratitude in his eyes. There was only calculation and a cold, hard sense of entitlement. He reached into that thick leather wallet, pinched a single $20 bill between his manicured fingers, and he didn't even hand it to the child. He tossed it onto the wooden table between them. It fluttered down like a dead leaf. "Here," Sterling said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Go buy yourself a hot meal, and you're lucky I'm in a hurry, or I'd have the officer check your pockets to make sure nothing else is missing." I heard a collective gasp ripple through my courtroom. My clerk, who has sat by my side and seen almost everything over the decades, actually dropped her pen. The audacity, the sheer unadulterated arrogance of it. I've had hardened criminals stand before my bench and show more grace than this millionaire. I looked at that $20 bill resting on the table, and then I looked at little Leo. Let me tell you about this boy. He didn't reach for the money. His stomach was probably twisting with hunger. His feet were freezing in those damp shoes, but he didn't even look at the bill. He kept his eyes locked on mine, standing as tall as his shivering frame would allow. He had more honor in his taped-up sneakers than that man had in his entire custom-tailored existence. I hit my gavel, just once, but hard enough to make the heavy wood ring out across the high ceiling. "Mr. Sterling," I said, and my voice was dangerously quiet. "Pick up your $20. Pick it up right now and go sit in the front row of the gallery. Do not speak. Do not check your phone because this court is not dismissed, and I am certainly not done with you." He blinked, visibly shocked that someone was finally telling him no. He bristled, opening his mouth to argue, but he saw the look on my face. 30 years on the bench gives you a look that doesn't brook any arguments. He snatched up his bill and sat down, fuming indignantly. I turned my entire focus back to the boy. I softened my voice. "Leo," I said gently, "step a little closer to the bench, son." He shuffled forward, wrapping his oversized jacket tighter around himself. I leaned down and asked him the question that had been burning in my mind since he walked through those doors. "Leo, why didn't you keep it? Nobody would have known. You could have bought yourself a warm bed, new shoes, food for months. Why did you stand in the freezing rain to give it back?" And what this starving child said to me next, it broke my heart wide open and put it back together all at once. Leo looked up at me. His cheeks were hollow and his lips were cracked from the biting winter wind. He didn't hesitate. He didn't have to think about his answer because the truth was already living right there in his heart. He said, "My mom got very sick last year, Your Honor. Before she passed away, she held my hand and she told me something I promised I'd never forget." His voice was small, but it carried across that completely silent courtroom like a bell. She said, "Leo, we might not always have a warm bed and our stomachs might be empty sometimes, but we have our name, and the moment you take something that doesn't belong to you, you lose the only thing you truly own." I had to pause. I just had to pause and let those words sit. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. Anyone who watches my court regularly knows that gesture. It means something touched me somewhere deep. I looked at this 10-year-old boy wearing a jacket that was swallowing him whole, and I saw a king. I saw a child who possessed a wealth of character that all the money in Richard Sterling's bank accounts could never buy. The gallery was completely silent. I saw grown men, lawyers who argued tough, bitter cases every single day, wiping their eyes. But the story doesn't end there.